Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and joined with me, as almost always. You haven't missed a show lately, man. Good job. Is Jason.
I are like English.
You are like English. Yeah.
I are like English. English are good. Speak it goodly.
It's been a rough night. We're running late because I ordered food through DoorDash, and then for some reason it took them 2 hours to get it here, which was kind of annoying. I still didn't get to eat.
Well, see, Nate, the problem is that the place that you ordered the food from is so incredibly distant from your house
Yeah,
that it took that's all driving time.
I could have walked to the place, ordered it, waited for it to be made, and walked it home faster than DoorDash. I should have just done that.
The driver that DoorDash chose to pick up your order and deliver it to you is from 3 towns over. So.
Yeah, he may have delivered it on a donkey or something. No, I think a donkey would have been faster.
Probably.
Yeah, it's like first world problems, right? The place is close, but it's like miserable and rainy outside, and I had a show to prepare for. So instead of thinking about food, I just ordered it through my phone and figured it would be here in time. Nope.
That DoorDash guy taught you a lesson, didn't
Yep, I learned a valuable lesson
they,
tonight. Yeah, I believe his name was Chris. Although, who knows? Can we assume Chris is a he? Their name was Chris. How's that?
That works. Yeah, they taught you a lesson. Oh, I see. You're gonna get DoorDash because it's rainy and crappy out. Well,
yeah, well, it's rainy and crappy for us too. So you're gonna wait. Anyway.
I hope you tipped well. Oh wait, let's see. How does that work? It's rainy and crappy out, so tip goes up. But it took disturbingly long to get the food.
I tipped whatever DoorDash built into the tip, which was
good.
Not a ton of money. It might have been 10%. And then DoorDash must get a cut of that because I think it's more expensive when I order through DoorDash. Next time, I'm just going to call the damn place and then get on my own donkey and ride down and pick it up. Something's binging.
Yep. So you're. I mean, we're not to the section where you start talking about things, but apparently you're getting a donkey. Let me put that in the notes for you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get a donkey. Can someone tell me where to get a donkey somewhere in the United States? A rideable donkey. It has to be one that I can actually ride. Otherwise, it's just going to be a lot of extra work. All right, so tonight we're not talking about DoorDash or donkeys, although maybe we could have a show about DoorDash and services like DoorDash. I don't know if that really fits into our usual thing. Maybe the technology behind them. It is kind of neat, right? But I don't want to get too distracted because we're talking about something that maybe DoorDash utilizes to make their services work, microservices, and a few other related things that Jason has thrown in here, like service discovery and service mesh, although there's a question mark after that. So we've been on this little journey of talking about cloudy things. We talked about a bunch of cloud terminology in episode, I think it was 125. 126, we talked about lift and shift and running, like your bulky, fat applications on a cloud provider and why you might do that and maybe why you shouldn't do that. And today we're going to talk about one of the things you're going to have to learn, I suppose, if you're going to really, truly cloud nativize your applications or write applications that are meant to be cloud native. And that's microservices, right? So we touched on microservices a bit in our cloud sort of terminology episode. But today we're going to dive a little bit deeper. So I've been talking a lot already. Jason, you want to tell us what a microservice is?
Yeah, just like it says in the name, it's a tiny service. And that's our show, folks. So
we're done. Bye.
It's a tiny service. I mean, I'm not sure how else to really, without going into super detail, which we will, but
yeah,
it's a small service. So, if you think of, I don't know, any sort of web system, like say DoorDash, you think of what that is and how it works. The only thing that you as a consumer really interact with is the app or the front end, whatever that happens to be. But on the back end is a bunch of stuff that happens.
Yeah.
And it can all be broken down into services. You need something that sends the order to whatever place you're ordering from. You need something that stores the order in a database. You need something that sends the message to whatever driver or whatever they're called, slave that they're using. You need services to create reports for stuff and to do charge, like all of those different things. If you take any complex system and break it down into its individual services, a microservice is an implementation of one of those services.
Right. So if you've ever heard the term monolith, right?
Yes.
Not in the reference of the science fiction story, or it's like the definition of the word monolith, but in an IT perspective, monolith is an application that takes all of those pieces, right, that Jason just talked about. Imagine that DoorDash were a monolith application. All those pieces would be written into one chunk of code, one big application that did all the things. Right. A microservice takes all those and breaks them into smaller pieces, and then separates them, and then they have to be able to talk to each other. Right. So I guess this is a really logical transition into why the hell would I do that?
Yeah. So I guess you start with your monoliths that are just everything stuffed into one, and you have this problem of, okay, cool, we've got all this working, and now I want to change what the website looks like. Crap, now I need to go in, I need to make all those changes, I need to recompile that application, I need to redeploy the entire application. You have to test end to end every single possible iteration of everything to make sure that it all works. And it works the same way. And then you can deploy it. And that takes a lot of time.
And then, God forbid, you miss something, right? Because something didn't get tested right, makes it into prod, doesn't work properly. Now you got to do the whole process again to fix that. Except now there's the stress of getting it done quickly because production is broken.
Right. So then they started getting into modular programming, which was, it's still one large program that runs, but you've broken things into modules. That can be sort of added and removed. And if you modify a module, you don't necessarily mess with the rest of the system. And a lot of systems have changed and moved in that direction. Kernels in operating systems are generally modular now. So you can add and remove drivers without having to recompile the entire operating system. So it's key to a lot of things. But you'll still find modular and monolithic systems out there. And then the microservice revolution sort of really started with the ability to spin up individual servers easily, and not having to, not really having to purchase a ton of iron all over the place to run your individual services. Virtualization helped a lot with this. Containerization has taken it even further. And then if you believe in serverless, quote unquote serverless, that takes it even further. So you can break these things down into individual parts.
Wait, are you suggesting there's still a server in play when there's serverless? But it's in the name.
Of course. Yeah. It's just like wireless.
Wireless.
Yep. So now we've hit the point where we're building ever more complex systems that are just absolutely massive. And you have hundreds and sometimes thousands of programmers and developers that are working on these things.
Right.
And having a single, and I'm sure there's people out there who are going to argue with this, but having a single code base that everybody is working on at the same time can cause problems. It's potentially manageable, but like the larger the project, I mean, you're going to have more. You're going to end up with more project managers and more other personnel than you're going to need for the actual developers.
More hands on the project mean more coordination in order to make sure that one developer's not stepping on another. Make sure that, heck, just being able to merge your code, right, means that if I bring in my code and this other thing is calling my function that I worked on, does that still work the same way? Does the input and output still work the way it's supposed to? What if did I extend it or did I replace it? That sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and there are positions that do this. Build engineers are kind of the big one. They're the ones that are there, and their job is to make sure that the builds work, make sure merges happen, make sure the build system is running, make sure that the builds that are coming out are building all the it gets very, very complex. And that's not to say that using microservices is going to make all that go away, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But why you would want to use microservices, at least and there's lots of opinions on this, of course. Mine is the most important, so we'll talk about that one.
Oh, good. Well, you're here on the show. Everyone else isn't.
Yeah. Yep. So, so microservices can make, from a code perspective, a microservice can be significantly less complex. So, if you think about it if you think about how a monolithic program is sort of written, you have to take every single call, and if you're calling this service or that service, or you need information from over here or over there, all of that has to be built in and written in, and you have to know where it's coming from and make those calls and sort of manage all that yourself. You still do that to some degree, but it's much more standardized if you do it the right way. It's much more standardized when you deal with microservices, because now you set up just an API interface for each of your services. And you use that API from whoever needs to call it. So you may have, service A that calls B, C, and D, right, and then you have service B that calls E, F, and H. So individual services only need to know about the other services that they need to talk to. Nothing else needs to be known. So you can write very simple services that go out and just get that information. There's a little bit more complexity that you add to it as you start to scale. And you have to kind of, you have to obviously manage the system end to end and understand what's calling what and how it's being called. And, so there is complexity there. But if you have a bug in the widget service, you go in and you say, got to fix the widget service. You go in, make your change, compile your code, which now takes, 30 seconds instead of the 3 hours it took for your monolith to compile. And you test it.
Yep.
And that bug is fixed now. It works end to end, and you deploy it. Done.
And there's a word for this that's escaping me at the moment, but there's this concept of like dead code that's left in your monolithic application, right? A function that's written that nothing actually calls, but you can't remove it because you don't really know if anything doesn't call it. And yes, there's ways to track that down. But I would imagine with a microservice, it's actually even easier to identify because there's a web service involved that presumably logs when things actually talk to it, right? So, that might make that piece a little bit easier to manage too.
Right. And web service is the most common API that you would use. You would just stand it up as a on a web port, typically encrypted with
right.
TLS on it.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be a web service. There are plenty of microservice systems that use proprietary communications between the different microservices. There's ones that you can use memory. You can transfer information in shared memory. Those are a tad bit more complex, but it's possible.
Sounds a bit more complex, but I bet it would be faster.
It all depends. Yep.
When you say shared memory, does that mean that it must be running on the same host, or is there some way to do that over a network?
Well, yes. If you want the fastest speed, it would have to be on the same host.
Yeah.
If you're
Don't some network adapters have like a memory offload feature?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so
some caching services do this too, where they can share like the stuff that's cached in memory across several nodes. I remember doing this when I was dealing with Zimbra back in the old days.
Yep. So your super high end network cards, instead of using interrupts in the kernel to transmit data between the network card and whatever application needs to read it, they have ones that will just drop that information directly into a shared memory space, and the application can read it right from the shared memory space. Those are used very often for, they're for extremely high speed applications. Think like, trading stocks, for instance.
Right.
So like NASDAQ and Dow and everything. Like those systems use that because it needs to be nanosecond timing, and you can't get that if you're using interrupts to talk to the kernel.
Right.
So Memcached shares memory.
Yeah, that's a different thing. I'm just
it's nothing more than a key store, but it's in memory, so in theory it's faster.
Right. So, yeah, we've already gone down a rabbit hole there, I suppose, with sharing memory
Yes.
across the network and whatnot. But so I guess to summarize, right, a microservice, you could say, is either a function or maybe a small set of functions that have been broken into their own little application, which you then interact with, usually over a web service, but there could be other ways to make that happen. And it does
Right.
it does a specific thing. Like, this is my microservice that gets credit card data out of the database to generate a report with. This is
Yes.
my other microservice that when a charge comes in, it does the transaction. This is my microservice that, I don't know, pulls in a user record when I need to display it back to the user, like that sort of thing, right? And then these are
Yep.
all sort of linked together by some front end, right? Maybe not front end, maybe, I guess front end would be the right word, that is able to call all of these back-end microservices via generally some sort of an API, whether that's a web-based API or some other thing, right? Does that sound about
Yeah.
right?
I mean, typically there's a front end that talks to something on the back end, but
Yeah.
from there it can filter out wherever. So usually you have a front end, one or more API back ends that talk to that front end. And I say one or more because sometimes you break out your front end into different functions, and you'll pass those APIs based on what function you're doing to a different back end, and then those back ends can sort of spider out to whatever they need. They
Right.
can use one or all of the services that are available.
So maybe this is obvious to some people, but maybe it's not obvious to everybody. But we said this is a cloud topic. Why is this a cloud topic? Why do microservices matter when you're talking about being in the cloud?
Microservices matter. I don't know that it's necessarily exclusively the cloud.
It's not. I don't think it is either, and
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm
no.
needling at. But
Um,
why does it matter more in the
cloud
cloud?
cloud kind of brought this forward because it's cheaper to run, depending on the cloud and depending on how you dole things out, it's cheaper to run a pile of containers than it is to run single servers. And what you can do is have things that, so for instance, with containers, you can have one or two containers that are running 24/7, which would be like your front end and your immediate back end that it talks to. And then the other containers can be spun up when they're needed, depending on load. You may have a
Right.
set of them running all the time, but as the load increases, it spins up extras to do the load balancing. So from that perspective, you can save a lot of money, tons of money,
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of running
Because
instead of yeah
that monolith, right? And stop me when you've heard this one, right? You've got you have someone whose job it is, right, to figure out what that machine needs at peak load, right? And if that monolith doesn't scale based on load, it means whatever that peak load is what you have to be ready for all the time, right?
right
Now, if you've got an application that can be spread across several nodes, that makes it a little better. But you've always got at least one box that's running all the time, consuming CPU and memory on like an EC2 instance, which is probably the most expensive way to use, in my example, Amazon, right? Amazon's
right
AWS. Whereas with a microservice-based application, you may have one or two things that are up all the time, or maybe a handful of things that are up all the time, or maybe things that are being used all the time so they never actually get to shut down, but they're tiny. Theoretically, they're tiny. Yes, they might not be tiny, but as compared to that monolithic application, they are tiny, right? And it also brings in resiliency, I would say, right? Because it doesn't matter where that microservice is running, or if you took it down for milliseconds to do a code update, because maybe there's a dozen other ones running, right? And they just kind of get rotated in,
right
and that's part of the beauty of containers, right? You can do this idea of draining from one pool and putting everything into a new pool. And as long as the old application, the old microservice, and the new version of it perform, they're compatible with each other, you don't even see the difference, right? Of course they'd be compatible. That's the whole point. But anyway, if like a whole region of AWS goes down, as long as you can spin them up in a different one, boom, you're back up and running, right? Now,
right
that doesn't happen that often, or shouldn't. But this is what we were talking about with the lift and shift thing, right? If you're hand feeding a VM on your cloud provider and there's some outage that takes that VM down, it's not nearly as easy to bring that back up in a different region as it would be a bunch of containers that are just like, bang, spin them up.
Right.
I'm rambling already, but anyway, I think I was trying to get that across, right? So it adds a layer of resiliency, which is exactly what you need when you're on a cloud provider or on several cloud providers. I guess this might translate to several cloud providers. I don't know.
It could. You can you know, depending on how you write your services and what tolerances you have, you could in theory run this across multiple service providers and be, you know, super resilient. You know, oh no, all of Google went down. That's okay. It's still running in AWS and Azure. You know, that sort of thing.
Right.
There's drawbacks. I mean, so you have greatly simplified the services. And sort of brought them down to core code, but there's still complexities that can be there. So if you want it to be scalable, those services need to be stateless or as stateless as possible, because now, you know, you may want to spin up a dozen of them for load balancing purposes, or, you know, one or two of them crash. You don't want that to interfere with what's going on. You want the customer, or, you know, the customer to be able to see that. So you have to sort of be a little careful in how you write them. Additionally, there's other challenges there where now, instead of one big monolithic application that you deploy, you know, and let's say we're in a perfect world and you've deployed it by typing deploy app and it just does all the stuff for you.
Boom, magic.
Right. And with a monolithic application, that can potentially be done. It's usually pretty straightforward. Install the app, and as long as the config's there, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
With a microservices architecture, you're now deploying tens or hundreds of different services.
Right.
And that can get complex. It doesn't have to. It depends, you know, it really depends on what you're building. And if you build it carefully, it can stay relatively simple.
And I'd imagine, well, I guess for new deployments, this may be different. But even for new deployments, right, I've never done this professionally, but as a hobby, I've done software development. And usually it's, okay, I have the core of my application written. Now, what does it need to do next? Right? So I can imagine that in a microservices deployment, it would be, okay, these are my core services that I need. Let's stand those up. This is version 1. Right?
Right.
So I'm not deploying 10,000 containers or 10,000 microservices on day 1. You know, I'm deploying a dozen. And then every new feature I bring in might be, you know, another couple, right? So that complexity, unless you're like greenfielding the whole application. Oh God, I used the word greenfield. They're getting to me. Anyway, unless you're like nuking the whole thing and rebuilding it on a new provider, a new platform or something, you're not going to be deploying those thousands of containers all at once, right?
Right.
In practice.
There's still right. But even if your application's out there, you've been running for a couple of years and, you know, you've added services here and there, the complexity comes in where it's now an operational complexity, you know, talking between services, you know, we have an outage because, you know, communication between service A and service, you know, CCC suddenly stopped. Well, why? And what do those do? And understanding what each service does and what it should be communicating and orchestrating all that together. Now,
and how it routes and where that thing's located, especially in a complex deployment like we talked about before. Oh, we're across several cloud providers. Okay, well, what if all of a sudden you can't route between two of them for some reason? Something weird, like all your traffic got routed through China.
So in a monolithic application, if communication stops between one part of the app and the other part of the app, well, there's got to be a code. I mean, like trying to debug that can be that you need code level debugging at that point because it's all internal.
Right.
If you lose communication between one service and another service, generally the first thing that you kind of look at is, well, I mean, is the service running?
It's the firewall. It must be the firewall.
The next thing is connectivity. Like, did you lose a route somewhere? Is it a firewall issue? You know, like you start going down those paths of figuring out what's going on.
And we've all been in those meetings, right? We've all been in those meetings. Yep. It's the network's fault. It's the firewall's fault. It's the application's fault. No, it must be DNS.
Or, communication is working and you're scratching your head trying to figure out why, and you find out like, oh, it's latency.
Right.
It's communication's working, but
Right.
it's taking too long and everything's timing out. So there's a little bit more complexity on the operational side.
Yeah, so I think what I'm getting at there is one, you need a varied skill set still. It's not like you need just developers, right? You need people that can troubleshoot these different layers. Especially
Yep.
if you're doing it on-prem. If you're on-prem, you need expertise in all this stuff. You can't just like fire off your network team, right?
Right.
If you're in the cloud, it gets more complicated, doesn't it? Because you don't have insight into the network layer.
Cloud providers are getting a little bit better at this, but yeah, I mean, generally, the only thing that you're seeing is your layer. So, you may see that you're supposed to, based on your security groups and your routing tables and how you have your VPC set up or your virtual networks or whatever term we're using in cloud these days. All of that could be in place and something could still not be working, and it could be something behind the scenes that's broken, which happens, but they've gotten better at identifying that has happened and either routing around it and having it, sort of heal itself. The auto healing networks, have you heard that? Or they've sort of come out and said like, hey, there's a problem in communication between this and this, these two sites or these services or whatever, and they let you know. It still happens, but they're a little bit better and faster at doing it now.
All right, so in a nutshell, that's microservices. You've also got a couple other bullet points here. What is service discovery? The term sounds straightforward, but I feel like maybe it's not.
So you've got tens or hundreds or thousands of all of these different services running all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how to connect from one to another? In the monolithic world, in the world before we delve into this, typically you have given each one of these a name,
mm-hmm.
and you program into your config files. You need to talk to this server over here on this port.
Yeah,
and
here's the
that's
database.
How you get to that service.
Yeah, right.
Yep. But when you're dealing with tons of services that spin up and down on a whim automatically, how do you figure out where they are? That's called service discovery.
Couldn't that just be like a load balancer somewhere, or does it have to be more complicated than that?
You could, but how does the load balancer know where the services are that it's load balancing to?
Oh, that's valid.
And the concept here is kind of the same with service discovery. So the load balancers, at least the ones that I've messed with, kind of work the same way, where you'll register a target with the load balancer. So if you want to load balance between 5 EC2 instances, you'll go into load balancer and say, here, these are the 5 instances I want to load balance between. Go for it. And there are mechanisms in the API that allow a server to come online and say, hey, I need to be a target for that load balancer. And then off it goes. It becomes a target, and then it's available for load balancing. Service discovery works very similarly. So if there's sort of 2 phases to this. One is when a service comes online, it reaches out to a well-known address. So you still need to have a well-known address of some sort,
mm-hmm.
Which could be, service.discovery. I mean, you're sort of running your own DNS at that point, so you can name it whatever you want. So it reaches out to Bob and says, hi, Bob, I'm service X on this IP with this port. And it can register multiple services. I am these 12 services, or, I have these different ways of contacting me, whether it's, I provide this service, but you can contact me over a REST API, gRPC, carrier pigeon, whatever. And it registers it with a service. Yes. It registers it with a service discovery system. And then when a service is trying to connect to something else, it goes out to that well-known address and says, hey, I need to connect to that service, that specific service. I need to know where it is. And the service discovery will come back and say, yep, I know where that is. Here you go. And there's a million different ways this can work. It can come back and say, here's all of the instances of that service, and sort of leave it up to the service to do that. or it can come back and say, just round robin through them. Here's that service. Here's the same service on a different machine. Here's the same service on a different machine. Or it can use intelligent load balancing, all sorts of different stuff. But the gist of it is that it hands you what is effectively an IP and a port for that service. So your front end comes in and says, I'm talking to the user. They want to store some data in the database. I need to know where the database service is. The service discovery says, okay, here you go. This is the database service. And then that app will talk directly to that database service. And it may cache it so that it just is a little bit faster next time.
Mm-hmm.
Or it may use the service discovery every time. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it. Depends on kind of how you're programming it, what system you're using, etc. And there's a ton of these different service discovery systems.
Yeah, so you've got a few
some are
listed
built
here.
in. Yep.
I've heard of etcd. I think I've heard of Zookeeper, but never seen it. etcd, of course, I've heard of because that's a core component of Kubernetes, right?
Yep. etcd is a core component of Kubernetes. I don't know if it was one of the first or I'm not even sure. Zookeeper is another one from the Apache organization. So of course it's written in Java.
Why wouldn't it be?
I just remember headaches trying to get that working for whatever we were working with. The one that I'm the most familiar with is Consul. So that's from HashiCorp of Terraform fame. So Consul, excuse me, Consul is actually a lot of different things, but it does service discovery. And what you'll find with a lot of service discovery systems is that they typically include a key value store of some sort, so that you can use that for configuration. So you may be looking for a service that needs to have certain configuration when you hit it, and that will come out of that same service discovery.
Yeah, the key value piece is the piece I was aware of, right? Like that's the piece I know of in etcd. I didn't know it did more than that. I compared etcd to something more like a config database. Is that wrong?
No, it's right. It just and again, I don't intimately know etcd, but it does come up as a service discovery application as well. So I don't know it that well either. I've only tinkered with Kubernetes. I've never actually even run a cluster, to be honest. I haven't done enough with etcd to sort of really mess around with it. A lot of that is kind of hidden behind the layers in Kubernetes and just kind of works. But my understanding is that it's relatively limited. Can you leverage something like this, service discovery, even if you're not doing microservices? I don't know why you would, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, now that I've said it, right? No, you absolutely can, and there are reasons to do it. So, for instance, Windows servers are junk, and when it comes to containers or Kubernetes or whatever, it's kind of a pain in the ass to deal with them. But there are lots of companies that have written Windows services. Mm-hmm. And one way to sort of keep things even across the board. So if you write your Windows application to reach out to your service discovery and register itself, you can use the same service discovery mechanisms across the board instead of having to say, okay, go to service discovery if you need anything, unless it's these Windows services, in which case we've hard-coded all this information. Oh, okay. So you can put sort of your legacy services behind the same thing, and then as you're working on maybe improving the way you deploy your application, it's just like changing it at the service discovery level instead of changing it at the code level or something like that. Right. And you could deploy your service discovery system across multiple clusters, multiple, whether multiple clouds, multiple clusters. There are timing issues and latency and other stuff you need to deal with, and there's ways around it and how to handle that. But you can deploy this in a huge area and use that same mechanism to jump from one system to another, depending on what you're deploying. So if you have some crazy big data system that you just had to use Azure's latest big data stuff with, and the majority of your system runs in, I don't know, AWS or Google or whatever, you can have that Azure piece register with your service discovery, and then whenever something needs to talk to it, it'll know. Doesn't really need to know that it's on Azure. It just knows it's over there. Go talk to it over there, and it works just like like I said. It's basically service discovery is nothing more than like dynamic DNS, really.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a.
I was seeing similarities there in my head.
Yeah.
But this sounds like it's probably easier or maybe more efficient to manage than DNS.
Yeah, that's why I said
DNS has like timeouts and all kinds of stuff to deal with, right?
Yeah, this is why I said it's more like dynamic DNS. So dynamic DNS, you kind of Windows still uses it. So you kind of register in and say, "Hi, I'm here, and here's my address." And it adds it into the DNS, and then it's available. Right. This goes a little further, where you're able to do load balancing, because you may deploy a database service, and the first one comes online and says, "Hi, I'm the database service. Here's my address and port." And then 10 others come online because you've had to scale or something. Those 10 come in and say, "Hi, I'm also the database service. Here's my address and port." And it lists them under one, at least in Consul, it lists them under one heading, database service, and it says, "Here's all the servers or all the services that will respond for that." And it does other things. It does health checks. It does, you can set what kind of load balancing you want. So it's relatively intelligent, and it's always checking them. So as long as you have health checks on, it'll always check them. So that way, if one of them goes offline for some reason and doesn't deregister itself, systems like Consul will go, "Oh, hey, that's offline. I'm not going to hand that one out anymore.
Right.
I'm just going to mark that as down until it comes back." It won't unregister it. Maybe you can set parameters for that. I'm not sure. It'll leave it in there so that maybe later on it'll come back and it'll be usable again. But until it does, it's marked as, "Yeah, this was here, but not available anymore."
So and this is more or less for clarity's sake. It sounds like there's a whole lot of similarities between service discovery and a load balancer. But I think the core difference here is that a load balancer stays in the middle, right? Yes. So like a request comes to the load balancer hands that off to the backend service, and it keeps track of what backend services are still responding and how quickly they're responding and which one should probably be the most efficient to send the next request to and whatever. Whereas service discovery sounds more like a directory service, where I call up the phone directory, or I call the person at the switchboard, and they're like, "Oh, there's 10 people that can deal with that. I'm not going to connect you to them. I'm going to tell you how to reach them." Right? Yeah. Does that sound more like it? And then my client or my service will say, "Okay, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to send all my requests to that one because I know that's one. And if it stops responding, I'll go back to the service discovery and say, who else is there?" Right? So it's more like I'm handing out who to connect to instead of I'm connecting you to, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. And a load balancer, depending on what kind of load balancer you're using. But if you talk about, typically it's a web-based load balancer. A load balancer can also do route matching and header matching and all sorts of other craziness. Service discovery is like, where's the Bob service? Oh, it's over there. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, I've got 20 things registered to the Bob service. I'm going to give you the next one in the list. Here you go. Have fun.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right, and then you've got another heading here for service mesh. Have you covered service discovery enough here? I think that we've got that.
Yeah, we've beaten that one to death.
Okay, so what's service mesh?
So service mesh is basically the same general idea as service discovery. So it typically includes the service discovery piece, but it adds more. It adds it allows you to route through the service discovery system, where it will carry the traffic from end to end, and typically offer you some extra benefits. So I have here, I've written down, because of the routing end to end thing, it's kind of like the old, and this is where I date myself. This is kind of like SMDS or frame relay or ATM, and even SDN, where you're sending traffic in and magic is happening in the middle, and it comes out the other end. So you, as the service, don't need to know where the other end is or how to get there. All you do is say, I need to send this traffic to this service. You hit service discovery and say, this is where I need to go. This is the traffic that needs to get there. And service discovery says, gotcha, and takes care of it.
So it is a load balancer. You just described a load balancer.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It is, but with extra benefits.
Or like a web application proxy, perhaps, right?
Yeah. I mean, it has some security benefits as well. So you can use it to do policy. You add, so a lot of the service mesh systems automatically encrypt and do end-to-end mutual TLS automatically for you without you having to add it to your application.
Would you
call
it a next generation load balancer?
No, because that's a marketing thing, Mr. Marketing. I would call it service.
I just remember back to the days of next gen firewalls, right? And it was like, oh, good. So you've taken my firewall and made it needlessly complicated. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a next gen.
Okay.
The next after gen, the after next gen.
It's turbo gen. I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't have as much experience with these. I've seen them in action, but I haven't stood one up. Really needed to.
I did. I was trying to poke around with Kubernetes. On DigitalOcean has a Kubernetes service where they'll spin up the cluster for you, and then you can put services on it.
Right.
And their tutorial used it. They didn't refer to it as service mesh specifically, but that's essentially what it was. It was like, this is how things reach your application, no matter what's behind it, right? Your containers or whatever are behind it, but this is like the endpoint. And I think that's pretty much what you're describing here.
It's very similar. It has it can do other things. A lot of the basic point-to-point connectivity, the mTLS point-to-point connectivity, the encryption, all of that is sort of like, that's entry level these days. Like, if it doesn't do that, don't bother. It's not worth looking at.
Yeah.
On top of that, they're adding in a lot of stuff for monitoring the traffic and making sure that it is what it's supposed to be, and like statistics and all sorts of extra bells and whistles. Like, that's sort of the application management operation lifecycle stuff is all built into that now.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, if you're not doing TLS encryption, like, it kind of has to be there, right? As of a couple years ago, right? If you have a website up that's not using TLS on the front side, Google won't even send traffic there.
Sure, that's
means you're killing yourself, right? So
yeah.
If your backend stuff isn't doing it, you're kind of missing the point, right?
Well, the backend stuff, you want to do it because you want you don't want anybody to be able to listen in on what's going on.
That's my point, right? So if you have to go to the effort of doing it on the front side, you might as well do it on the back side as well, right? Unless like traffic that stays in the box, I guess, is different, but traffic that's traversing a network should be encrypted.
Well, when you're dealing with microservices and clusters, it's leaving the box.
Right. Yeah.
The difference is this, and it's a very important, just in my mind, very important distinction. When you're doing TLS on the front end, whether it's mutual TLS, which is sort of not something you typically do with a website, or it's just the typical SSL encryption that we all see, which is TLS these days, but the little lock icon in your web browser, there is a very robust, long-lived, developed for a very long time, battle-tested piece of software there that's handling the TLS for you. So
right.
Apache, Nginx, whatever, like that's, somebody wrote that, it's handling it 100%. And it does it very well, and it knows all of the security gotchas, and
because it's been doing it for 30 years, right?
Right. When you're dealing with a back-end service, you're adding that in yourself. Now you're not right. You're not. I mean, unless you're insane. And
You're
please don't
not
do
writing
this.
algorithms
Right.
yourself.
You're not writing the algorithms yourself, but you are implementing that TLS encryption on whatever you're using in your service.
So you're bringing in the library and interacting with it is what
Right.
you're saying, right?
Yes, and it is very easy to implement those libraries the wrong way. So what happens is, I mean, it's not rocket science to do this, but it happens a lot where people implement it the wrong way. So what things like service mesh can give you is a mechanism by which you can get that encryption, that mTLS, quote unquote, for free, and not have to deal with writing that stuff yourself. And the way that it, my understanding, the way that it does this is it basically uses sidecars in the server that you're in the node that you're on, that your application is on, your service is running on. When it sends the data, when it sends the communication that it's trying to get from end to end, it sends it inside of the server. So it'll send it from one pod on that server to another pod on that server. That second pod is the one that handles all the encryption. So you may be in the clear from pod A to pod B,
Right.
but from then on, from pod B to the other end, it will handle all the encryption, mTLS, the whole 9 yards. And then when it passes it back to the service on the other end, if that service doesn't handle encryption or whatnot, it will decrypt it and hand it in the clear again.
But pod A to pod B is essentially in memory on the host you're on. It's not traversing the wire, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be encrypted unless you're hyper paranoid.
Right. So unless somebody has access to that server directly, like if they're on that server,
right,
they're not going to be able to intercept that.
That's the way I handle it for my own. Well, it's not the way I handle it. It's a similar concept to how I handle it for the stuff I run in containers, because I don't have a cluster. I just have a box on DigitalOcean where Nginx is terminating TLS, and then it hands it off locally to the backend container. The backend container doesn't leave the box, right? It's all local on the same machine.
Right.
So I don't encrypt that piece because it doesn't seem like it's worth it. It's not worth the effort to try to get a cert on there. It's not worth the security benefits that I might have.
You don't have to life cycle the cert. No, there's a lot of reasons to do it. And you'll see, like, even if you're using like AWS's load balancer, and talking to whether it's containers or an EC2 instance or whatever, a lot of times you'll see people won't put TLS encryption on the server itself. They'll just let it, plain text to the load balancer. And that's relatively safe. You're inside of AWS's network, so the only way that that's going to get intercepted is if somebody's inside of that network. Not something you can guarantee, but it's a lot safer than trying to connect to a load balancer, that's in Google, and you have to go over the open internet. Like, at that point, like, So there's it depends on what your risk profile is.
I did that once because I had a site that I was hosting here, and I needed to get it to a third party, but I didn't control DNS for it, and the person that did control DNS for it, I couldn't get a hold of. So I proxied it from here to like AWS or something. It's crazy. Yeah. It's just like, this will work. And then when I finally got a hold of the person, I was able to do it. That was back when I had that little web host that I was running on the side when we were trying to shut it down.
They've done this stuff like that all the time. Like, you do what needs to be done at the time. You just need to know what your risk profile is. That's all.
Yep.
So
that was encrypted though. They had a cert on the server, right? So I just TLS encrypted from my Nginx box here to there, but because I knew it was going over the open internet,
Right. Yeah. The only, if you do mTLS at that point, then it's a little more secure, because now the endpoints have to register with each other, and it's encrypted, and it's the right guy and whatever. So
cool.
But that's service mesh.
All right.
And all of those mechanisms work together with microservices, which is why I sort of put them in there.
Right. That's the whole reason we talked about these extra two pieces, right? Because they kind of work together with the microservices piece, right? So if you have microservices, you're probably going to benefit from service discovery, and you're probably going to benefit from service mesh. In fact, they may almost be required in like a modern deployment today.
Yeah.
So.
And I didn't want to interrupt you, but apparently a zombie just ran across the screen.
Yep, we had a zombie. That's because somebody subscribed. Thank you for subscribing. I think it was Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. If you're actually watching live, that's even better. Maybe that actually is a great point. So, well, maybe we'll talk about it in the chat. I'm going to leave myself a reminder to talk about what I just thought about in the chat, because we're done with the main topic unless you had more to say. I think we've covered it pretty well.
That's microservices and service discovery and service mesh, and I expect emails telling me how wrong I am and correcting me.
Well, I mean, if you're not doing it wrong, are you really doing it at all?
No. And if I don't do it, if I keep doing it right all the time, I'm never going to learn anything. So.
Yeah, right. You got to do it wrong first. All right, so this is the end of part A of the show. We're gonna go to a break. If you're listening to part A, you should probably tune into part B, because that's the fun part. That's where we talk about stuff we got going on. We're going to talk about the news. We're going to have more drinks in us. But
the part isn't fun at all. Just you can skip over that.
Yeah,
just
right.
Put that right at the little teaser at the beginning. This is the A part. Skip it. It's boring.
This is the A part. We're just going to talk about boring work stuff. Boring technology stuff. Anyway, right. So if you've listened to part A and you want to hear part B, you should, if you're listening like after the fact, you should go check out whatever you're using to listen to your podcasts and look for part B of episode 127. If you're watching live, we'll be back in a few. If you do want to watch live and you're listening audio only, check us out on YouTube and Twitch. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast. You can find us on the socials. And yeah, we're going to go to a break and we'll be back. I don't know. It shouldn't be too long. I don't think it'll be too long. Last time I said that, we were gone for like 15 minutes because we got busy talking about something on the break. You and Mark.
I'll just be quiet this time. That's fine.
Just be quiet. Just be quiet. All right. Here's the thing I'm looking for. All right. So we will be back in a few, folks. We'll see you in a few minutes. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If
If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin, or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com.
I am happy because we've transitioned from IPA season to pumpkin ale season, which means we're very close to stout season. I think that's how that goes. All I know is all freaking summer, everywhere I've gone and said, "Can I get a stout?" They're like, "No, it's not stout season." I know you look as confused. You look as confused as me when I'm like, "What do you mean it's not stout season?" These words
don't know what snobberies you're going to, but
these words don't compute. Like I don't understand what you're saying. Not stout season.
It's always stout season.
It is,
and it's never time for pumpkin. Ugh.
Well, I mean, these don't taste like pumpkin. It's just whatever
it's
spice they put in it. It's like I don't drink
affront to humanity.
I don't drink pumpkin spice lattes, but I drink pumpkin ale. They're good.
No, thank you.
This, and like a good Oktoberfest, they're good too.
Look, I guess you can have wrong opinions too, so whatever.
Whatever. Mister, I don't like strawberries.
Don't like those either.
I know, that's why I said it. Anyway.
But lots of people like strawberries, and I make fun of it. Pumpkins is just, they're ugh.
It's not like drinking a pumpkin pie, if that's what you're worried about. But it's just like a hint of like, I don't know. It's also Susquehanna Brewing, which I'm pretty sure is local-ish anyway.
Strawberries actually give me headaches and like
what?
I have like it's like a physical reaction to it. Like
weird.
So it's not necessarily I don't like strawberries because I don't like the taste of them. It's just
that strawberries don't like you. They attack you.
They don't like me.
They attack your brain.
But pumpkin, I just don't like. Pumpkin just tastes gross. So whatever.
Okay, all right. Anyway, this is the part of the show where we have our usual announcement-y stuff. And there's one I forgot to put in there. I'll have to add. All right. So first and foremost is our usual Patreon update because you patrons are awesome. It occurred to me today while I was reviewing our patrons and if there were any changes or whatever, that since we have pledged to give our Patreon funds to the American Cancer Society at the end of the year, I may as well give you guys a tally of how much we've actually raised so far. So as of today, remember we started this in July, all of our Patreon funds are just basically staying in the savings account that they go into, and that account is currently up to $224.48. Now that doesn't sound like a lot. But you got to remember that Patreon takes their little cut out of stuff, and there's fees for stuff like the shirts that we send patrons. That comes out of that, right? That means Patreon costs us a little more. So yeah, that's that. I haven't spent a dime of that. Usually I spend that on, like the hosting, and sometimes I use it to buy beer for the show. Sorry, Jason. I should probably send you beer for the show, too. Or whiskey. You drink whiskey, don't you? Or scotch or something?
Yeah, but I live so far away that it's.
You do. You're so far away. I couldn't possibly hand deliver it or anything. But you are further away than the Chinese place I ordered my DoorDash from. And that took 2 hours.
I suppose. I suppose that's true. I order Chinese from there all the time, and it does not take me 2 hours to get it. So
I've done it plenty of times too, and it's usually longer than if I were to order it and drive down and get it. Just because I don't know why. I'm not really sure why it's longer, but it's longer. But yeah, this was excessive. And to be honest, it's pure laziness on my part.
Yes.
It would have taken me almost no effort to just call the order in and drive down and get it. But I'm not bitter. My Chinese food is waiting for me in the fridge, so we better finish up this half of the show quickly. Because right now I'm surviving on just the calories in this beer, and we don't want to know what happens.
You can stop talking about Chinese because I'm getting hungry now.
We could actually talk about our patrons, which is exactly what I was doing next. Yes. So we want to say thanks to our current patrons, name pending 197, Jeremy, Arinomi, Andrew, Tatro, Bruce, Robert, David, Solemn with some numbers in there, Linux 666, Marc with a K, The Mentor, Marc with a C, Julius, Andi, Jay, and Charles. Thank you to each and every one of you. We appreciate the funds. Or more accurately, the American Cancer Society will hopefully appreciate the funds at the end of the year. So yeah. The other announcement that I wanted to throw in that I forgot to put into notes is that the DEF CON 610 pub crawl is coming up. We do a capture the flag pub crawl, and it's going to be in November this year. I think November 19th is the date we've decided on. Be in Easton, Pennsylvania. So if you're anywhere in the area and you want to do a capture the flag, or you just want to tour a whole bunch of really cool eateries and bars in Easton, which Jason can attest to, there's a lot of good ones.
Like there's some really good ones.
Really good food and really good beer comes out of Easton, PA.
And remember, if you're not literally crawling between them, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, right? I mean, that's always the image I have when people talk about a pub crawl, but no, they just talk about going from bar to bar. I don't know, which sounds more like just a binge drinking thing.
And you can crawl between them. It's probably further than people want to crawl, but it is definitely crawlable.
The places that we did last year were literally like a 2-block, maybe 3-block span. 2 blocks, so they're relatively large blocks, but yeah, they're really not far. And some great places. We had like this cool Mediterranean place we went to. Another one that was like, I guess it's like Cuban? Tierra del Fuego. Do you know them? I think they're like Cuban. But it was good food.
It is very good. Are they Cuban? I'm not positive. I don't know. I have had food there. It's very, very good.
I don't know for certain. And then, of course, it all circles around Two Rivers Brewing, which is where we have our meetups, and they have really good beer. However, they're the ones that told me it's not stout season, so maybe they gotta put a black mark against them for that. Bastards. Stout season. It's always stout season. Yeah. Always. Anyway, I'm gonna add that to the notes, so anybody wants to participate. You're going to want to look up the DEF CON 610. You can find us on Meetup, or we have a Discord group, which is probably a better place to get the info. But I'll put that. DEFCON610.org is our website. Go head on over there. Cool stuff. Anyway, I think that's all of our announcements. Do you have any announcements?
No, I do not. Do not. DC 610 pub crawl coming up 11/19 !
Yep, there we go. That's our announcement. Like I said, I'll put a link in there when we're not on the air. All right, so time for chat. I bought a thing. I bought an old thing, an old cheap thing that was better than the older, cheaper thing that I had before, which is a server for my home lab. I had an old Dell server, Dell PowerEdge, like 320 or something that I had inherited at some point, which didn't have enough CPU or memory, but I was using it anyway as basically my home lab hypervisor. And I finally just got sick of it and went to, there's this cool site, maybe you've heard of it, called LabGopher. Basically,
no.
Do you remember PriceWatch back in the day?
Yeah, it's still around, isn't it?
It might be. I haven't used it in forever. But PriceWatch, what they used to do is they would like get prices from all the places where you would buy electronics from, and then they would tell you what the cheapest place was. Well, what LabGopher does is something similar, except they monitor auctions, and they look for specifically servers that you might want to put in your home lab. And you can filter it based on like, oh, I want this much memory or this kind of CPU or this price range or whatever. And then it just shows you a list. And then you can just go right to the auction and bid or buy or whatever. I found an older, it's like a 10-year-old HP Proliant with not a whole lot of hard drive space, but that's fine because I have the Synology for that. But it had 96 gig of memory and 24 spread across 2 CPUs, 2 physical CPU, 12 core each, Xeon cores, right? I think that's fine for a home lab, right? It's certainly better than what I had, which had 4 cores and 32 gig of memory. And that's only because I slapped as much memory as the damn thing would hold into it. And that's been serving me okay. But, like, for my home lab, I have maintained a satellite server because, especially as a TAM, I really needed to be able to get my hands on satellite from time to time. And the requirements for satellite keep going up. It's currently 20 gig of memory. So that's more than half my hypervisor, and I decided that's a problem. So, so I finally bought a thing, and I got an operating system installed on it today. It actually runs RHEL 9, which is good. I was a little worried because it was older hardware, and I know there was a bunch of hardware that got retired with RHEL 9. Yeah, it's up and running in my basement. I don't have any VMs on it yet, but at least it's running. So
you have a new jet engine in the basement.
pretty much, it's not as loud as I have a. Well, you probably remember this. Remember when we were at the college, we had that IBM machine we used for KVM,
Yes.
KVM 0. Had like 128 gig of memory in it, and it was like a 4U box, right? I have that in my basement. I can't run it. It's
pounds.
I can't run it. It's too loud. You can hear it through the floor. So I haven't been using that. The light's dim when you turn it on.
Yeah, but if it's running, I mean, so first of all, you pipe the output of that to your heating system.
Yeah,
It
right.
heats the house up in the winter. And if you have it going, it like nice little buzzing in the floor, then a little vibration. You get used to the sound, a lot of white noise, helps you go right to sleep.
Sure. Yeah, no, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner running 24/7. That's not what I want. So
yeah, that wouldn't fly in my house either. So.
Yeah, this one is loud. It's louder than the old Power Edge that I had, but I had it running right here in my office while I was getting it set up, and it wasn't so loud that I couldn't stand it. So it's not that loud. I didn't like measure
Louder
the
than
decibels
a
or
Power
something.
Edge. Power Edge is pretty loud.
Well, the Power Edge that I had, or have, I should say, it's still in service, is like the bottom of the line Power Edge.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not that loud. It's a little louder than... Well, honestly, this Alienware machine, when I got it, the Alienware desktop that I use, it was air-cooled when I got it, and it was quite loud.
I just remember opening up the new Dell servers and just seeing just rows and rows of fans.
Yeah,
and
this one...
You could pop out a single fan, and it was like modular, and you could pop them in and out, but like, there were so many.
Well, this one doesn't have quite that many fans. It's more like... It's almost like if you were to take a high-end desktop and put it in a 1U case, is really what it feels like. It's not like it's server grade, but just barely.
Yeah.
But
so bad news. Price Watch is in fact dead.
Yeah,
it has been since at least 2020, probably earlier.
Price Watch, last time I looked at it was probably a decade ago, and it had gone downhill. It was basically like, if you needed cheap crap, you'd go to Price Watch because that's what it was overrun by.
It was the best site,
it was. There was a point where anytime you had to buy anything, you would just go to Price Watch and you'd look for it, and ta-da, you'd find the best price and trustworthy vendors, and yeah.
The suggested replacement is PC Part Picker.
PC Parts Picker? I think I've heard of that.
PCPartPicker.com. I don't know who owns them. I mean, they seem like a standalone thing, but they got to make money somehow. But
make sure that.
Yeah, they have. It looks like it's mostly gaming PCs that you build off of that. So I'm gonna poke at them because I'll talk about it later. But I'm looking to build a new machine too. So.
All right. Anyway, sorry. I got distracted by a child looking for her phone charger. Because,
that's important.
Door is closed. Can't just respect
I told you, all these maker projects that you're working on, you need a recording light.
No, what I need is a deadbolt. Because that's what would keep them out.
Well, right. That's so the first stage one is the recording light.
Yeah.
You need the little switch to turn it on and off. And stage 2 is when you flip the switch on to turn on the recording light. The deadbolt goes. Ka-chunk.
No, it electrifies the doorknob. That would work. During the show, you'd hear, ouch!
Yes. This screams of somebody being tortured during the show.
Yeah. So anyway, I put a link for LabGopher in the show notes if anybody's curious, but it's just labgopher.com. And they even have international versions of it. Apparently there's like localized versions of LabGopher. So if you're not in the US, there's like uk.labgopher, that kind of thing. All right, let's see. What else did I put in here? Oh, my 3D printer's doing weird things. And it's annoying. You know how and it's one of these things that I've seen on all of the 3D printer horror stories, but it's never happened to me, where the layer shift, right? Where it's like printing
Yep.
along and all of a sudden it shifts by a couple millimeters and now the whole print is messed up because the layer shifted. Um, it's doing it, and it's not just every now and then. It's like, I don't know, every 20 lines or so it's happening. Maybe that's probably more than 20 lines, but it's happening several times in larger prints. And it's, I haven't looked into exactly why yet, but I did look into what could cause it, and there's like 128 things that could do it.
Yeah,
And I just
it could
haven't.
be software. It's could be a slipping belt.
I think that's probably what it is, because this printer's had a lot of use, and I think there's probably something that's just a little worn that needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, the belt on this is I forget if it's got teeth or not. I don't remember, but it's possible that the belt could be worn down. Maybe one of the teeth
Yeah.
broke off or something.
Yeah.
So that's where I would look.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I want to check first is the belts. Make sure they're not loose. Make sure there's not just like one of the pulleys are loose and needs to be adjusted. They say the belt could slip, and if the belt slips, that'll do it. So it might just be that something needs to be tightened. Yeah.
Right. Yep. So, and it usually happens only on one axis.
Yeah. Yeah. In this case, it was left to right, which I think
x-axis, I believe,
is the x-axis. Depending, it's the 3D space is so freaking confusing, right? Because you got when I put things into my slicer,
Z is up and down.
Well, yes, that one's easy. When I put things into my slicer, right, they show up in one way, but then when they end up on the printer, they're not always the same, and that's just like a difference between the way the slicer presents things and the way the printer does. But yeah, it's the left to right side that's doing it. So anyway, that'll be annoying and hopefully easy to fix. See, you added a note about the donkey. Thank you.
You're welcome. I told you I was going to.
Must be rideable. The other thing, yeah, it's,
and if you want to get that reference, you got to listen to part A.
Yeah, right. You got to understand why I need a donkey. The other thing is, I've since before my mother-in-law got really sick, I've been using the Jeep, but not like the full-on hobby that it was beforehand. And I'm finally getting I'm finally really able to focus on it again, and I'm starting to do some work on it again, and I've starting to cook up this cockamamie air intake thing, right? So I'm people listening to this show may not care about that, but I'm happy to finally be planning a project again and trying to actually make this thing work. There's gonna be some fabrication involved, and there's gonna be hopefully something that not a lot of people have done before to happen or to occur by the time I'm done. So that's kind of fun. But again, a lot of Iron Sysadmin listeners are going to be like, what? Why is he talking about cars? We don't care about cars. We want servers. Although, I got to say, I have found a surprising number of IT people that are also into mechanical things, including cars. So maybe I'm off on that.
It's a maker mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I mentioned at the end of Part A that there was something that seeing Tyler subscribe to the show reminded me of. Maybe we should have him on the show sometime. Tyler, if you're still listening, if you're still watching, whatever, we should have you on the show to talk about Enable Sysadmin. Because Tyler is kind of the guy that I contact whenever I have an Enable Sysadmin article to publish, right? He's part of that team.
Gee, Nate, what's Enable Sysadmin?
Enable Sysadmin is a user submission blog, I guess is the best way to describe it, right? It's a Red Hat blog, but it's not populated exclusively by Red Hat content. I mean, it's Red Hat related content, but it's not written by Red Hatters, not like the Red Hat blog. It's all written by Red Hatters.
It's not necessarily Red Hat related either. It's
yeah, I mean, most of it is.
It's typically just Linux related.
It's at least adjacent, right? We're not going to take a blog about Windows Server, is what I'm saying.
You might. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Tyler, what do you think? Maybe
they were pretty open, so
maybe he's not.
I have a number of articles on there that I wrote a couple of years ago.
Yep.
That I did a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep.
I don't know, probably at least half a dozen, maybe a dozen, maybe more. I don't even know.
Well, you had written
And then
enough. You had written enough that you were brought into the sudoers group, right?
yeah,
Which I
yep.
think is
And
10
then
articles in a year. So
yeah, then
you wrote at
I
least
got punched
10.
directly in the yep. I got punched directly in the face with life, and I haven't written anything since.
Yeah, I've like I still write from time to time, but I don't have as much time as I used to write them. But I do want to, and maybe with the new role, I'll have more chance to write. In fact, there's a couple articles that I have sort of in queue that I want to write that are going to end up on Enable Sysadmin. I just haven't had the time to sit down and do them. But yeah, if you're listening to this show and you like to write blogs about technology related things, reach out, because Enable Sysadmin is always looking for new content, and it's actually pretty successful. It's a great place to get some exposure for your stuff, right? So, it's not like you're going to be rich and famous for writing on Enable Sysadmin, but it's a great way to write a thing and have professional editors review it, so that you end up with content that you might learn something from in your own writing style, because you'll have people reviewing it and saying, tweak this, change that, this might get better SEO, that kind of thing, right? I found it helpful over the years. So yeah, Enable Sysadmin, good stuff. It's like redhat.com/sysadmin, I think, is the place you can go see the articles.
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, that's my plug for Enable Sysadmin. And just seeing Tyler watching today was the only thing that reminded me of it. We've talked about it before on the show, but again, maybe we'll have him on someday and he can talk about what it is. And anyway, what do you got going on, Jason? I've talked a whole bunch. I'm going to drink more.
Yeah, because we need that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the bought a server. I'm starting to think about replacing the server I have. I've got I don't remember what the processor is in it. Some weird Intel thing that I've had for a number of years now.
Is that low power one that
runs-
you built?
Yeah. Yep. So low power. It's got like 32 gigs of RAM in it. And I run a whole bunch of stuff on it. And it's running. I went all in with what was it? Not Core OS, the other one.
Atomic.
Atomic. I went all in with Atomic because I really, really liked Atomic. And I went all in, built my server, got the whole thing running, was super happy with it.
Sorry about it.
And Red Hat said, yeah, so we bought Core OS and Atomic we're just getting rid of it. So thanks, Red Hat.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So swapping that out to put a new OS on it is a major undertaking.
Yeah.
And it's starting, like, I'm starting to get it's old enough that I'm concerned about the drives. I'd like to run some more stuff on it, or maybe have that stuff run a little bit faster. So it's starting to show its age a bit. So I was looking around trying to figure out what to build. Kind of want to. I'm just going to go ahead and build one again, because running a small jet aircraft in my basement is not on the to-do list. So I would like.
Right.
I would like something in the mini ATX range, hopefully, instead of some big, massive, ridiculous, server that needs a rack.
Yeah.
And I started digging around. I can go down the path of getting whatever the latest shiny Intel is, although the pricing is always stupid compared to things like AMD.
Yeah.
So I started looking around. Intel's still stupidly expensive. AMD seems to be reasonable, and I don't need bells and whistles. Like, I'm not looking for the latest, super awesome gaming, blah, blah, blah. I just need something that has, a decent number of cores, that has a decent clock speed, and off we go.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to look at the AMD EPYC processors, server level processor. Mostly I'm looking at those because I want something with, a 64 or 128 gig capacity minimum, with like, half a dozen or a dozen SATA ports, so that I can put, just load the thing with drives and off I go.
Yep.
And that's it. It needs to display a terminal screen. I don't need GUI or anything else. Like, I don't even use that.
Yep.
So starting to go down that path, trying to figure out what's good, because I don't pay attention to, the hardware at this point. I just kind of.
Yeah, I found that I had the same problem, right? I was gonna start building, start just like go to Newegg or something and start picking out a board and a processor and memory but to be honest, it used to be computer hardware was right at the tip of my brain, right? Oh yeah, you could rattle off what was the latest, greatest, and the best to buy. Not anymore. It's just like I've moved to other things, right? that occupy my brain.
I was digging, trying to figure out what to buy, and I saw, I'm like, oh well, what's AMD got, and like what's an EPYC? Looking at that, I'm like, oh, it's a server processor. Okay, sure.
Yep.
Is there anything super special about it? I don't know. I need to do a little bit more digging, but this is a box that I want running. I mean, this box that I have here has been running nonstop for 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
So I want something similar. And I will replace Atomic with, I don't know, probably. Part of me wants to go core, but I think what I'm going to do, because I still have a single VM I run, so I'm probably just going to run whatever CentOS has become.
Yeah, my plan for this one, I put Rail 9 on it, like I said, but my plan for this one is to run a mix of containers and VMs on it, right? Which is something I've never done. I toyed with it on the Dell, but the thing I wanted to run in a container was Plex, and it ran like crap. And I think it ran like crap because that machine does not have a graphics card, right? So in the machine that I run Plex on right now, it has not a high-end, not like a 3D graphics card, but it just has an NVIDIA card in it that's meant to drive a couple displays, right? And it's able to offload transcoding onto that card. Is the only thing I can figure as to why it works so well on the machine it's on and not on the Dell. That was really, that was, anyway, I forget where I was going with that.
Plex runs fine on mine.
A combination of the two, right? Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, it just did not run right. I would end up, if there was more than one stream at a time, it would just bog down. It couldn't transcode fast enough. It wouldn't, you'd end up with buffering, and it was really frustrating. Yeah. So we'll see if that happens on the new box. I found an old desktop I had sitting around that had an NVIDIA card in it. Happened to be compatible with my decade-old server. So I popped that in there, and hopefully that will not be a problem. But anyway, all that to say, I think you're probably going in the right direction to have like a normal Linux OS on it. That way you can mix and match workloads. It doesn't have to be just containers, for example.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and learn how KVM works these days.
So I'll tell you that this should be available on CentOS. Yeah, it's got to be available on CentOS. But the cockpit web UI for RHEL is actually it has a really nice libvirt management tool built into it.
Might give cockpit a try. I keep seeing it and I keep looking at it going, yeah, whatever. But
yeah, right. I mean, we
something like this, I might use it.
We come from an era where web server management tools are just a gateway to exploit. Cockpit's not that. I mean, it could be, I suppose. It's one more thing that someone could try to attack, but you basically wall it off, especially for something like you're doing, where it's just has to be accessible from your local network. Don't make it accessible to the world or anything. But yeah, it works really well.
What if I need to remote into my server when I'm in, insert not home here?
I mean, use a VPN is all I can say. But you know that. But yeah, it's in the what's new material for RHEL 9. One of the slides, and it doesn't get a ton of information, a ton of attention, but one of the slides is that Cockpit now works on mobile, so you can be at the bar managing your server on your phone.
Nice.
But yeah, Ricardo's in the chat. The libvirt plugin for Cockpit is great, right? There was a point where on that little Dell, I ran Overt with Overt Manager, which just the footprint was too big, so I ended up having to go back to just a libvirt box because it required 16 gig of memory just for the Overt Manager. But I did it specifically so I had a management UI. Well, Cockpit's libvirt tool is good enough, right? That I don't need it.
Nice.
So anyway, you had more stuff on your thing. I'm gonna go back to drinking.
Yes, I got a new toy. See my new toy? Isn't it wonderful? This is great radio, by the way.
Yeah, right? Look at this thing I have on screen that I'm not going to talk about yet.
Yes. It's a dock.
It's a dock.
It's a dock with what's it got? HDMI.
Is it full of water vapor?
Is it full of water vapor?
Yeah, you know, like when you boil water, the thing that comes off the top.
Ah, yes.
How much have you had to drink?
That's not a drinking thing. That's like where's he going with this?
What are you talking about? Water vapor?
Well, water vapor isn't necessarily steam. Come on. But it's got a dedicated Ethernet. It's got a bunch of USB ports, HDMI, DVI. Or is it DVI? Whatever that is. No, DisplayPort.
If it has one side with a squared off corner, it's a DisplayPort.
It's DisplayPort. Yeah. So it's the new Steam dock for the Steam Deck.
Steam dock for the Steam Deck.
So that just showed up. So now I can connect my Steam dock to that, which I can then connect to peripherals and use my Steam Deck, without on like a bigger screen.
This naming isn't confusing at all.
Yes. So my next thing is I have one. I just don't know where the hell it went. I have a Steam controller. Do you remember the Steam controller from years and years and years ago that came out and was completely awesome and then it died? Like Steam just got rid of it?
No, I don't.
Apparently,
I think I've heard of it now that you're saying it.
Yeah, it's such a cool controller. Anyway, it works natively with the Steam Deck. Surprise!
Wow.
So I just need to go. I was thinking about it today when the deck came. I'm like, wait a minute, I've got a controller. I wonder if that works with the Steam Deck. So,
but can I use my Stadia controller with it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It works on Bluetooth, right?
Theoretically, I use it through USB-C.
I mean, maybe it would work through USB-C, but the Steam Deck apparently works with just about any Bluetooth controller. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Stadia controller is special because it's Google. Basically, it doesn't, even Windows doesn't recognize it as a plain old controller. It recognizes it as a Stadia controller. And without this little, like, shim of a driver, which basically tricks Windows into thinking it's an Xbox controller, it doesn't work for every game. It seems like games have to have built-in support for the Stadia controller for the Stadia controller to work, which is weird. In a world, in a world today where peripherals are not supposed to have to be like coded into your application, the Stadia controller does. And maybe it's games that were developed for Stadia that have the support. I don't know, but yeah. Like, Stray and Elden Ring can use the Stadia controller without that shim in the middle. But Cyberpunk won't use it unless I run the little emulator thing.
Yeah, still haven't touched Cyberpunk.
It's fun. I think you'll enjoy it.
I think I will, but yeah, I'm probably going to play. Well, we'll see where I play it. I've heard so many horror stories about how buggy it is. So I'm still trying to finish Watchdog Legion,
I gotta say, I have not run into many bugs. I didn't play it on launch day. I bought it a couple months after launch, but I have not run into many, at least playability bugs. Right?
Well, this is why I wait so long. So,
yeah,
I was also going to get it on launch day, and my buddy bought me Watchdog Legion for my birthday because it came out around that time.
Yeah,
and I eagerly jumped into it and started playing, and then came back to play some more and went, wait a minute, why am I back at the beginning of the game? I lost like 10 or 15 hours of play. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll just make sure I resave now, and then went through, and there's really no way to make sure you save, and lost time again. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. We're waiting. So I'm back to playing now, but we'll see. I've lost save again, at least once since I started playing again. But the latest time that I restarted it seemed to have saved. So,
well, I
kind of want to beat it and be done with it. I like the story. I like the game.
I've had 0 save game problems with Cyberpunk.
Yeah, those are unbelievably frustrating.
Yeah.
The cyberpunk stuff that I've seen is like, getting in the car to like drive somewhere and hitting something and like launching yourself into orbit.
I haven't seen that. I did see, so like when you call a vehicle, I primarily use the motorcycles as a mode of transport because I think they're easier to control and it's fun, right? It's just a fun thing to zip around the city on a motorcycle because you can like weave in and out of traffic and stuff.
Wow,
But
motorcycles are easier to control than the cars?
they are.
This is
For
like
me,
not,
for me they are.
this is like not Grand Theft Auto at all.
When you call your vehicle, right? So you can call it from anywhere, and it'll just like drive up, right? Because we're in the future and cars can drive themselves. Well, when you call the motorcycle, it'll just like slowly come up, right? Well, there have been cases where the motorcycle has run me over. There have been cases where the motorcycle was going so fast that when it stopped, it like flopped end over end. But I don't call those bugs. It's just funny, right? It's funny to watch it happen. And then like the motorcycle's ready to use, you hop on it, you drive away, right?
Yeah, I guess.
It's not like I died when it hit me, right? But it hit me and I get thrown.
Right. At that point, then it's no fun.
It was just kind of funny, right? But yeah, the only real bug I think that I ran into was one time I did a thing where the animation of the character was that I had like I threw something heavy over my shoulder, so the character went like this, and I fell through the floor. That's the only bug I've run into that was like playability-wise, and all I did was revert to a save, and I was fine again. And I did the same thing again and didn't fall through the floor, so I don't know. I must have been standing in just the wrong spot.
I was having those problems in Halo Infinite when I was playing. At the end of the game, too, which talk about frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
So like the way that Halo Infinite works with the saves and the restarts and everything is like if you have to quit or you have to go in and I forget what it is. You have to quit and restart.
You talked about this. There's like a checkpoint system.
Yeah. It's like a weird checkpoint system. And I like every time I would do a ground slam in the one area, I'd fall through the floor and be like, well, damn.
God damn it.
I'm
in the floor again.
Like, he's got this much health left. I just one more hit and I'm through the floor. Crap. Start over.
Restart.
Do all the battles again.
Yeah, I was on like not an overpass, but like a tunnel connecting two buildings, a walkway. And when I did the thing, I fell through the floor, and all the enemies I was trying to avoid were under. So I fell through the floor, and they're like, "What's that?" And they killed me. So that was a little frustrating, but again, it's the only real bug I've run into. It's the only time it happened.
The little exclamation points appeared above all the heads, and they turned and shot at you.
They're just like, "Whoa!"
Yep.
Dead.
Yep.
So
anyway, I have that and to play with now, and I'll probably get more use out of my Steam Deck. Maybe I'll hook it up and I'll see if I can do the podcast from the Steam Deck next time.
There you go. Maybe it'll work better.
Because that would be hilarious.
That would be. Marc will probably try it at some point.
Yeah. And what else? Oh, my honeydew list is just increasing exponentially these days.
Yeah.
Well, with the kids out of the house, of course we have to do all the projects now because there's no one to help us. So we're painting rooms and redoing fireplaces.
Are all your kids out? I thought you still had one at home. He's
at college.
My God, I must be off by a year. I thought he hadn't graduated yet. Wow.
He graduated with a college degree. So he's off to get another one.
He's off to other college. He's off to second college.
Yeah, so he graduated. He graduated with the college degree, did more college there for some other stuff, and then now he's at a different college, but he's living at the college now. So
damn. Well, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So busy.
Well, congratulations on successfully raising the offspring to the point where they can leave the house.
Yeah, but we just got them trained to do things like take out the garbage and clean up after themselves.
And they all left.
Help us with doing the housework, and now they're all gone.
Yeah. Well, only lasts so long, right? You only have your minions for a short amount of time.
Yep. So and that's it. And now we can talk about the news. So push that button.
Indeed. Where's the button? Here's the button. No, that's the wrong button. See, there's an orange button, and then there's a yellow button. The yellow button, I made yellow specifically because it's Homer Simpson. No! And he's yellow, right? The orange one, I think, is the push the button.
Push the
There it
button,
is.
Frank.
I accidentally pushed the yellow one instead of the orange one. They're right next to each other. So, you know. Somewhere I've still got Marvin, too. Where is he at? Discord!
Yay!
That's not it. It must be the blue one.
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
I don't use the sound effects nearly enough on this show.
You should get one of those. What is it? A stream deck, and you can just like tell it to put icons on the little things.
I looked into that, right? They also interface with Streamlabs, which is what I use to do the live stream. So you can set up like hotkeys that would do things like transition the screen and whatever. But I don't know. Since I have, technically, I can do that with the buttons that are on the Rodecaster Pro as well. They can do like what do they call them, meta keys, where you can make it do stuff in Streamlabs. But I don't know. I feel like I don't use that enough to care. Maybe I would if I set it up.
Whatever. I was talking more along the lines of you can put pictures on the buttons.
I could. Then it wouldn't just be like, is it yellow or orange for Homer? No! It's yellow.
Who cares? Who cares what the buttons do? They'll have pictures on them.
They could have pictures. Actually, this does have... There, I could do that. Now I can see what they say. I can switch to the next one, and I can do this. That's what we need on the show more.
Probably.
Oh, I forgot. I have a whole set of on the soundboard for when I used to play D&D with Marc.
Oh.
Anyway.
I don't know what kind of weapon that's supposed to be.
No, that's the level up sound from EverQuest.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and when I would play it through Discord on when we were gaming, everyone would go like, ah! Because it starts out so loud and it's so abrupt.
Yep. That's kind of what I was doing.
It used to be in EverQuest, when it would happen, if you weren't expecting to level up, it would like startle you. That's how it just became like a running gag in EverQuest. It's like, I dinged. Anyway, we're here to talk about the news now, I think. We're supposed to be on topic now, on point. So the Register has an article, how a Wi-Fi spy drone snooped on a financial firm. You included this. I don't know if you read it more deeply than I did. I did read through it, and it's a pretty fascinating story, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is quite fascinating.
I assume you had commentary. That's why you put it in here.
Well, it was more. We've seen this forever as a theory. I mean, it goes back to like Neuromancer had similar things in it. The book, where some sort of a drone or a flying thing was used to snoop on what was going on inside of a building, not like video, like on the wire.
Yeah.
And I think a bunch of different people have sort of shown proof of concept, if you will. So the article mentions a couple of them. So if you're familiar with Naomi Wu, she's a real sexy cyborg on Twitter. She did one that she called the Screaming Fist that she sort of demonstrated and used. There was a security researcher that did one called I don't know if he called it something.
Skyjack.
He uses a Skyjack drone. I don't know if that's a
is that what he called it, or is that what? Okay, maybe.
I don't know if that's the name of the drone. Naomi used a DJI, but his was a Raspberry Pi to. His was specifically to attack other drones, so it was kind of, which I guess was the Skyjack thing. So he would fly the drone up and use the Raspberry Pi to interfere with the signals from other drones and sort of take them over.
What an asshole! That's all I gotta say. Those things ain't cheap.
which is funny because my son did there was a DARPA sort of contest a couple years ago at one of the, I think it was at BloomCon. That was something similar where it was like you had to sort of build something to take over the drone.
Okay.
Now they were doing it from the ground, but same idea, like intercept and take over the drone and sort of control it yourself. So it's pretty neat. But this story is about an East Coast financial firm, a private investment firm.
They don't say who, do they?
They don't. No, they don't say who, and they just say East Coast. But I'm thinking probably either New York or
I would guess
like
New York,
Connecticut, or something along those lines.
Could be.
And not one, but they noticed a problem internally on an internal Atlassian site, and started digging in to try to find out like what happened, and noticed that the traffic was coming from somebody who was logged in locally, except that they also knew that same person was logged in at home miles away.
Yeah, it was that they were logged in at the same time, both locally and at home on the same Mac, if I understand this correctly. So they basically used MAC address spoofing to be like, yep, I'm totally this dude, even though that dude's at home on his cable modem.
Right. MAC address spoofing, which makes me think that they're using something along the lines of 802.1x. Right. Some sort of Mac-based authentication for the system. So they use that to gain access to the network, and were doing whatever. So they went on a hunt and traced the Wi-Fi signal that they were getting.
Yeah, so they used a fluke system? Is that like is that one of those handheld Wi-Fi detector things?
Well, Fluke makes all sorts of different stuff, but one of the things that they make is a Wi-Fi system that can be used to directionally identify where things are.
Right.
And they found it, and it was on the roof.
Yep.
And they found not one but two.
Yeah.
This is
what I found the most interesting. It wasn't just that they flew a drone to the roof and hacked into the Wi-Fi. They flew a drone up to do like sniffing to get the credentials they needed. Then they flew a second drone up that was already preloaded with the attack using the credentials that the first drone had gathered.
Yep. One of them was a Wi-Fi Pineapple, which is most likely the one that was doing the sniffing to begin with, to identify what to use. And the second one was a Raspberry Pi with a GPD mini laptop and a 4G modem. And apparently another Wi-Fi device, which was used to do the actual attack.
Right.
And that's apparently what they were using to intercept or to attack the network. I don't know if I've seen any articles or any reports of this happening. I've heard it theorized for a long time, both in again in books, from various different talks, whether more recent ones or ones from years ago. I've seen it done on TV shows once in a while, but I've never seen one, where they kind of really did it in the real world. It was neat.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy. Just to read through like the play-by-play, and of course this isn't a play-by-play. It's basically what they discovered and there's some conjecture there about how this occurred. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool use of this sort of technology, and I guess it's just one of those moments where the game is now changing. The game is stepping up to the next level, right? We're going to start using drones to break into people's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and they were talking, like, one of the things they mentioned is, that a drone can carry small payloads, but that the small payloads are getting more and more capable. So is
that the Flipper?
Yeah, this is the Flipper Zero that they're talking about in the story.
As drones get more sophisticated, means that they are easier to pilot, and they can theoretically carry more weight, right? Although they're not really designed to carry weight. But really, I think is what you're getting at is as these things get smaller and lighter, not the drones, but the payloads, right? Like a Raspberry Pi Zero, for example, weighs almost nothing. You could easily strap that to a drone, but what can you do with it, right? Well, the Pi 4 isn't all that heavy either. Or the Flipper that you were just showing. I don't know what that weighs. I've never seen one in person.
The Flipper's it's a bit chunky, but I'm sure you can cut the weight down if you need to. The Pi Zero can do a lot. Like your weight, most of your weight is the battery. Honestly.
But a Pi Zero consumes so little electricity, you could probably power it off the drone for quite a while. As long as you're not also flying the drone, right? Because they flew the drone up and landed it. Therefore, the drone is no longer using its battery to power propellers to keep itself in the air. It's just laying there. It's now just a battery, right? You could probably power a Pi Zero. I mean, for the Derby project, I used a 4K milliamp hour battery for the Pi Zero with a Wi-Fi adapter with a screen, and I got like 16 hours out of it. Right? Like, if you're more careful with your consumption, you could power a Pi Zero off that same little 4K battery probably for days.
Well, and again, if you're doing it off of a drone that, or a payload. So like the Naomi Wu's video was actually pretty good, because what she did is she flew the payload up to the roof, dropped the payload off, and took the drone back down with them. Right. So now, instead of a drone, she's got this little tiny device.
Yeah. That if you could somehow also hide it or something, right? Yeah. Like, that could sit there and go undetected for a long time.
Right. But now, if you have a device the size of, say, a Pi Zero, which is about what the Flipper is, and you put a solar panel on it, just a small solar panel.
Yep.
You can charge that thing over, during the day, and have it, juice up the batteries. Have it, you can do all sorts of stuff. Have it go into low power mode overnight, like whatever.
Yeah.
And only really do the interesting hacking bits during work hours, because you have all that other traffic and So there's a lot of stuff you can do. The article says, I don't know that I completely agree with it, but the article says that it's a fairly low risk thing, that like a low risk attack vector for companies. They don't have to really worry about it, because the specific targeting and whatnot. But
I thought you meant low risk. I thought you meant low risk for the attacker, because I would call it low risk for the attacker. If you can get this thing up there without any identifying information on it, they'll never know who put it there.
Yeah, which is sort of my point. Like, okay, so you say it's low risk because people aren't going to do that, but if it's that easy and you have a specific target,
Now a DJI drone, it's interesting that they used them specifically, because DJI requires you to register your drones with an account that basically syncs data to their cloud, right? So theoretically, unless they did a lot of work to avoid that, theoretically that drone could be traced. Now, if they're smart enough, they've done something to obfuscate that. But if you use a drone that doesn't require that, or hell, build your own drone that has its own compute in it and its own Wi-Fi pineapple in it, right? These are things that are attainable. Like I looked into building a drone once. It doesn't sound like it's that hard.
No, it's not. And these were not the smartest attackers in the world. It sounds, from the article, it sounds like they got caught.
Oh, okay. I want to see. I want to see how they did they just take a Wi-Fi pineapple and duct tape it to the drone?
Pictures would be awesome. But yeah, probably. What more do you need?
Why is there a DJI up here with a Wi-Fi pineapple duct tape to it?
Yeah, it seems
crazy.
It seems like a fairly expensive hack that they did, but they're going after financial firms, so
DJI drones are not cheap. They're a couple $100 a pop.
Yeah.
And I didn't look into the two models that they had, but I looked into drones for the YouTube channel. Unfortunately, they require a license in order to use them for a YouTube channel that makes money, so I dropped it there. But they're not cheap, like $500-600.
Yeah, drones have to be licensed now.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I don't know if they have to be licensed for every drone. There's a certain size limit to the drone before you require a license.
I don't know. I don't know what it is now, what they finally settle on, but I believe the number was 250 grams.
Yeah. Which isn't
when they first started talking about it.
It's not that much.
No,
I don't know what a DJI weighs. But for the YouTube stuff, it's specifically because you're making money with it. If you have a YouTube channel that has monetization turned on, you're making money with your drone, therefore you are a commercial drone pilot.
Right.
So you have to have a commercial drone pilot license.
So for the Americans who can't convert things. 250 grams is about a half a pound.
But how many bananas is it?
I don't know. What's the average? What's the average weight of a banana? Hang on. What is the
How many
average...
bananas does a DJI drone weigh?
I wonder if I can do that.
There's got to be someone who's made a
it's
converter.
Apparently, it's half a banana.
It's
let's see, 250 grams to bananas.
Tell me it doesn't. Tell me it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
God damn.
That's no fun.
It's such a joke now that Americans will use anything to measure instead of the metric system. I'm sure someone has a website where you can convert metric units to anything. Like how many gorillas is in a centimeter?
I wish I could convert this stuff in my head real quick because, like, metric system is so much easier for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
When I'm doing woodworking now, I don't measure in feet and inches anymore. If I can avoid it, I measure in meters, centimeters, because it's just like it's round, it's easy.
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with fractions.
How many centimeters are there in a meter? Oh. Just do the conversion in your head. Add a 0. All right.
Yep,
anyway, we've gone from talking about drone strikes, cyber strikes with drones, to how many bananas does a drone weigh?
Yeah. So now let's talk about virtual reality.
Yeah, let's talk about VR. So you might remember this guy, John Carmack, right? Yeah, John Carmack.
Yeah.
One of the brains behind some transformative video games, like the poster that's right behind me here, right? Him and John Romero made Doom, and of course the rest of the team from id. But they're the names that people remember. Anyway, you might remember years back, he was one of the brains behind Oculus before it was purchased by Facebook, and now of course Oculus is owned by Facebook. That's where the Quest came from. That's where Meta has been founded. Yes, the Meta Quest. But anyway, so I actually had kind of lost track of what happened to John Carmack. Apparently he still works at Facebook or Meta, right? And he's one of the brains behind their metaverse stuff. So the article that you've included here, Jason, is from Ars Technica. Carmack says, there's a bunch that I'm grumpy about in virtual reality. So I'm sure you have comments here, Jason. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So
unload.
So I've been a Carmack fan for a while. So I kind of follow a little bit. I'm not thrilled with the whole Facebook Meta thing, which is why I don't own a VR headset from them.
Yeah.
But he's been doing a lot with VR for a while, and I kind of have, with him at the helm, I kind of see that moving forward pretty rapidly. So it's sort of depressing to see the state of VR as it sits with Meta, because honestly, it's shit. It's so garbage.
This is disappointing, right? So a company with the finances and, you could argue, power of Facebook/Meta, and what do they have to show for it after a year since they've really gone all in on metaverse stuff? They have that screenshot we showed you guys a couple weeks back, months back, I guess at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in this article, but I think the number was like they spent in the past year, they spent like $1.2 billion on their Meta stuff, their virtual metaverse stuff.
Yep.
And I guess like Carmack's comment was, he said, last year I said that I'd be disappointed if we weren't having Kinect in Horizon this year.
Right.
And he followed that with this year, this isn't really what I meant. So
sorry, go ahead.
I am. This has to be in his contract, right? Like, there's no way that, like, I just can't. This is a guy who is an executive advisor for Meta, who speaks at their conferences and basically shits on their at least a little bit on their software.
Yeah.
And he's like allowed to do it. Yeah. Right. Like I pulled up because I wanted to see what he said. And I pulled it up, and like before he comes on, there's a blurb that says, his thoughts, his opinions, not necessarily the view of Meta. And I was
That's
like,
funny.
wow.
That's funny.
So like that feels like a contract thing to me. Like, you know,
So yeah, what
I'm sure he somehow got that in there, which is just funny.
For context, right? So roughly, I guess it was a year ago, right? At their last Connect conference, they announced Zuckerberg had his famous like I'm an Android look, talking about the new direction that Meta is taking. They're now moving into the metaverse space, and they're gonna like it's their birthright or whatever they said. I forget what the words he used. But they basically claimed like the metaverse is ours, is essentially what they said, right? And I guess Carmack made a promise to himself or his thoughts, or I don't know if he said it publicly, but next year for this Connect conference, we're going to do it in the metaverse, in Horizons or whatever Horizons that they call their metaverse thing. And what they did this year to make that happen was he did his talk from Horizons, but nobody showed up in Horizons. They basically streamed it so people could watch it in flat on their machines, on their normal laptops, because Horizon wasn't ready, right? They couldn't handle that load of people. At least I'm reading between the lines here, but it sounds like they couldn't handle that many people, so they couldn't host a conference in the metaverse like they really wanted to. And that's basically what he's saying he's disappointed about.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I guess Zuckerberg also, well, most of his keynote was, you know, actual normal video.
Yeah.
But he did part of it in the metaverse, which was all pre-recorded.
Yeah.
And his particular metaverse talk and everything. So if you're not familiar with the way that they've set this up, your avatar in the metaverse is your upper body. There's no legs.
Yeah.
You just float there.
Yep.
But for Marc in his part of it, he had legs.
Oh,
so
lucky him.
I don't know what sort of insanity was going on, but it was funny because they would swing around to see the audience, so that all these people in the audience who are waving and jumping up and down, and it's all torsos.
Were they fake?
And then you swing around, huh?
Were they fake?
I have no idea.
They were just little animations.
And you swing around to Zuckerberg, and he's there, you know, jeans and, you know, whatever. Yeah. He's got legs, and the person he was talking to somebody, and she also had legs, and, you know, was able to walk off screen and everything.
Only the presenters get legs. You know, is that how this is?
I guess, yeah.
The presenters get the spotlight, they get the big screen, and they get legs.
But then Carmack comes in to do his talk, and he's just a torso. So
Meta doesn't like him.
It's funny. It's funny.
It is funny. But he does. So I will say that. So the screenshot, right, that has gone down in history now, the selfie, right, that Zuckerberg posted. Carmack does defend that a bit, and he says that that's a limitation of hardware, right? They're trying to plan a world where, you know, thousands of avatars can coexist in the same space, right? And that, of course, brings hardware requirements. So their avatars are intentionally left simple, so that they don't have to be rendered as detailed, right? So if you go into like VR chat, right? One of the problems of VR chat is when you get 30 people in the same room, everybody is slow unless you have a really high-end machine, right? Well, Meta's trying to make stuff work on the Quest, which is really low-end when you think about VR headsets, right? Like PC VR has a lot more processing power than the Meta Quest can, because the Meta Quest is a disconnected VR headset, and that's their goal. They want a VR headset that is both lightweight and detached from the PC, right? So, but that's why it looks like that.
And apparently they've come out with new hardware. So they came out with the Meta Quest Pro.
Yeah, which is like $1,500 apparently.
Right. So it's got higher resolution than the Steam one, whatever that was called.
The Index.
The Index, yep. So it's got higher resolution than the Index. Like, congratulations, you beat a product that's what, like
3 years old,
4 or 5 years old, or something like that.
Yeah, the Index is a couple years old now.
Yeah. So you know, it's better hardware, better, you know, whatever. And Carmack kind of shits on that too, because he's like, look,
yeah,
you know, like, that's great.
And I kind of like where he's coming from, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off, but he wants VR equipment to be affordable and lightweight. He said below 250 grams, half a banana, and below $250, right? Which is admirable, right? So his vision, I think, judging from those specs, right, is that He wants something anybody can run out to the store and buy, cheaper than a cell phone even, right? Everyone, how many people have iPhones in their pockets, right? They cost more than $250. And light enough that you can like take it anywhere. You could throw it in your backpack and use it out in the world, right? Which is cool, right? I don't know if we're there yet. VR has a bunch of technical limitations that we just don't have the technology to get around yet, right? And I think that's what they're bumping up against. That's why the Quest is a low-end system at the moment, because in order to get the portability and the weight, you have to sacrifice power.
Yeah, and like his comment is basically, he said, you know, we're not building that headset today, but I keep trying. So he's pushing internally to do that, and he's getting brushed off, and you know they're going for these stupid high-end things.
Well, I mean, like it's good that he's pushing the envelope, but I think realistically, to be competitive, they can't. Like maybe they're going to have two versions of the product, right? I don't know, but
yeah, maybe. I think what's happening is Meta came out with this whole metaverse, blah 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 blah, and they touted it pretty heavily for business. Like you can have your business meetings in the metaverse.
Yep.
Well, I mean, sure, a business will pay $250 for a headset if it does what they need, but a business will also pay $1,500 for a headset because they're a business. So you know, you can make more money by selling things at a higher price, and a lot of VR companies are doing this, and it sucks.
And I've always suspected that they were not making a bunch of money on the Quest, and they were intentionally having the price where it is, hoping that they could rake in advertising cash on requiring that Facebook account. They don't require the Facebook account anymore. You need a Meta account, which is still owned by the company that owns Facebook, but it's not. I get the feeling that it's not the advertising revenue that they get out of a Facebook account, which makes me wonder if that's part of why the price went up.
They're still making so there was a huge backlash against the Quest requiring a Facebook account because people didn't want Facebook accounts associated with it, blah 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 blah. You know, like I'll never buy one because I don't want a Facebook account. So they went, oh, okay, you don't need a Facebook account anymore. You can get a Meta account.
Right.
How much you want to bet it's the same damn thing on the back end? You just don't have a page to log into on the Facebook site.
Yeah, so it could be, but the thing that makes the money on a Facebook account, at least what I imagine, the thing that gets you money out of a Facebook account is all of the interactions you have through Facebook. Right? So like having you in their system is one thing. Having you in their system and getting all the things you like and all the people you talk to and all the products you click on and all the ads you respond to, that's a whole other ballgame of advertising revenue for them.
Yeah, but they're going to pick up that same type of revenue from a different set of data. So now they're going to have what you do with VR, what games you're playing, what applications you're using, when you're online, you know, like who knows how deep it can go, right? Because they have all that data.
I mean, there's flat out biometric data that comes out of a VR unit, right? I mean, the Quest doesn't track you in the way that some do. Like it doesn't do full-on body tracking like a PC VR system with body sensors can do. But it can get a surprising amount of data out of how you move, how you walk. You know, it's not... I would argue that it's still private data, right? Because people with disabilities, for example, the Quest could probably figure out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But anyway, we're going way off tangent, I think, at this point. Not quite way off, but we've
that's so off brand for us.
It is. We totally never pigeon or rabbit hole. Pigeonhole's a whole other thing. Pigeonhole is a specific thing. Rabbit hole is like a whoa, where'd we go?
So moving along.
What's next?
Wired has a story. U.S. chip sanctions kneecap China's tech industry.
I'm curious where you're going with this one. I did read it, and I've also heard in the news about the legislature that was supposed to help chip manufacturing in the U.S. So, I'm curious.
I'm just not really going anywhere with it. I thought it was an interesting article. Just you know, just the sanctions in general. Like, you know, we're putting a bunch of restrictions in place and whatnot to try to get this stuff to be built in the U.S. and it's going to have interesting effects.
Yeah, I agree. I think it may already be having interesting effects. I thought it was ironic to hear on the news that they're pushing for, this legislature that says chip manufacturing has to be brought back into the U.S. And then it's like, oh, it passed. Holy shit, it passed. What do we do with the money?
Right.
I've heard that on the news. It's like, hey, we got all this money now. We didn't really have a plan for what we were going to do with it. So now they're trying to figure out what to do with it. I actually didn't know this was part of, I assume it's part of the same bill. These sanctions. I didn't know there were sanctions involved.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain where the sanctions, no, I mean, it's, they're calling it sanctions, but it's export restrictions. So yeah. I guess the idea is that, I mean, we're almost going back to, it's kind of going back to the sort of the PGP days where, we don't want this stuff leaving the US because national security, whereas this is, the sanctions here are to prevent China from being able to use our AI tech.
Yeah, that does seem kind of weird. I have mixed feelings about the whole, like, global economy thing. And this kind of impacts that, right? So, on one hand, I think that humanity, like, if you remove all of the turmoil that humanity causes on itself, right? I think that humanity working together could certainly do a lot better than humanity working in factions, which is essentially what we have in the current economy, where it's like, oh, we have to buy American, right? Like, I'm all for supporting American businesses because that could be like the guy down the street feeding his family. But I also think that innovation can be fueled a lot better by the whole freaking world working together, right? If we had the brilliance of people in China, the manufacturing capabilities of the people in China, and, like, the ingenuity of the people in the US working together instead of against each other, I think that would be really cool, right? But then on the other hand...
And that's not to say that you can't have the reverse, where the manufacturers and, China's the ingenuity, like, whatever. Like, just...
Yeah, I'm not trying to pigeonhole people into, like, what... Yeah. But I'm trying to think off the top of my head what currently, in the current economy, what these two nations are known for, right? Like, Americans will get shit done, they do it expensive. Right? They think outside of the box, they do crazy crap, but they're expensive when they do it, right? But sometimes brilliant stuff comes out of that. China can do stuff, like, really inexpensively, right? Anyway, that was what I was going for there. But if instead of being like adversaries in the global economy, if we're, like, all working together, I think this could be, like, humanity could benefit from this kind of stuff. And stuff like this inhibits that. But there's good reason for why it's inhibiting that. It's because we're not working together. We're all freaking adversaries, right? And I don't know how you get past that. But that's what I mean by I have mixed feelings about this stuff.
I don't know. I don't think Star Trek's coming anytime soon. But
yeah, right.
What I find interesting about this one, so first it's export restrictions. So now I wonder, like, what happens to open source projects that are, OpenAI and whatever. I don't even know where they're based, but are we gonna go back down this path of the PGP thing where it's like, this is stupid, like, well, you're not really preventing anything, but good luck.
The article talks about specifically chips and chip manufacturing, which is why I think it's related to that chip manufacturing in the U.S. bill.
Right, which is where the other piece of this comes in. It's like, well, apparently Alibaba built some new cloud system that uses AI, and it was built using hundreds of chips from U.S. companies Intel and NVIDIA. I mean, do they only manufacture in the U.S.? I don't know.
They may be...
a lot of our chips come from overseas, so
yeah. Well, so I think they're U.S.
make the chips for us, but you can't use them. Like,
I think they're U.S. based companies, and this is why I think it's related to the chip manufacturing bill, because the whole purpose of that was to bring chip manufacturing into the U.S., right? So currently we have a whole bunch of technology companies that are based in the U.S., but they send all of their manufacturing off to other countries because they can do it more efficiently or less expensively, right? Cheaper, right? So you have companies like Intel, and again, I don't have inside info about how these things work, but presumably you have companies like Intel, just using it as an example, where maybe like chip designs and whatnot are coming out of the U.S., but none of the manufacturing happens here. And what the bill, as I understood it, was supposed to be doing was the companies based here, the chips should be coming out of here too. Make American jobs, boost the American economy, bring that stuff back in-house. Because apparently most of these innovations came out of the U.S. to begin with, right? Like Silicon Valley is called that for a reason. It's not just because there's a lot of technology there. It's because that's like the birth of the microchip.
Right.
And now it's mostly not owned by, but controlled by other countries because all the manufacturing comes out of other countries.
Yeah, and I think I can't. Everything's blurry. I can't read the name on my screen, but whoever that is in red mentioned Taiwan and Guangzhou, I think is how you say that. I think that's what they were saying was the where the Intel and NVIDIA chips are made.
The ID is SAP kernel or SAP kernel. That's the person in red.
Okay. Yeah.
that you can't read.
It's hard to read. Yeah, Riverside doesn't show high quality video coming through, so I can't see it.
For those of you that are wondering why Jason can't read this, is because the only access he has to that particular facet of chat, unless he were to log into Twitch, is the video that I broadcast back to him, which is coming from Streamlabs, which is probably this big on his screen.
which is yeah, this big being the 2 inches he's showing in his fingers. And this aggregates chats from YouTube and Twitch, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I would have to log into both of them to see where it came from.
Yeah, most of the chat today has come from YouTube, but that particular person is chatting with us on Twitch.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on. What do we got next? The Verge. Firefox's new service gives you a burner phone number to cut down on spam.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. I put this one in here. So Firefox already has an email service which does this. They'll make you like, I don't want to call it temporary, but it's basically a forwarding address, right? That is intended to be a burner, right? So if you sign up for something where you don't want to give them your actual email address, you can go to Firefox. What was it like? There's a URL for it. It slipped my brain. Relay.firefox.com. You can say, like, give me an email address that forwards here, and I'll give the person that, and if I start getting spam through that thing, I can just burn it, and then make a new one, and use that for the next thing. Well, now they're doing the same thing for phone numbers, which is something I've done with Google Voice for a long time. I've maintained a Google Voice phone number specifically for the ability to chop it off at the legs if I needed to and make a new one. But now Firefox, or Mozilla, sorry, not Firefox, Mozilla has a service for phone numbers that works in the same way as their email relay system, where you can say, like, give me a phone number, and then you can use that phone number when you, like, sign up for a thing that demands your phone number. And then if you start getting spam calls to it, you can just, like, get rid of it. I assume that they could probably also build in things like filtering. I don't know if they do at the moment because it's all very, very new at the moment. That's the thing that I like about Google Voice is that you can do filtering and call blocking and things like that, where if you've given them your cell phone number, I know you're with AT&T, but I'm with Verizon. Verizon does a bad job of spam blocking. It doesn't work that well. I don't know how AT&T does it. But if I could just hand them a burner number, that'd be great.
My phone is just set to ignore anything that's not in my phone book.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I do at this point.
Yeah, which is perfect. The only I guess so that obviously doesn't work for somebody who lives on their phone and has to use it for like work and receive phone calls from wherever. It also appears to not work. So I have a buddy who uses the VA for health services, and the VA seems to make phone calls out of just a rotation of phone numbers, and they refuse to leave voicemails. Or
Bastards.
When they do, they leave a voicemail and you call them back and you can't get them. So you play phone tag all day long. So
yeah.
if he doesn't if he knows a call is coming, he has to turn it off. But in general, like I love it because I just leave it on all the time, and every once in a while I'll see 10 missed calls, and I'll look and it's like all spam.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you can't leave me a voicemail, you don't get a call back.
Yep. Now, if I'm reading this right, I don't think this is is this not a free service? It's you have to pay for it, or are they talking about a different service? I'm looking in this second to last paragraph. They're listing prices here. See. Is that another service they're talking about? It says the phone number masking service is also more expensive at $4.99 a month. I can't tell if that's a different service.
Yeah, it looks like you have to pay $4.99 a month. Oh no, you pay for the email service is $1.99 a month apparently.
Okay, so that's not free either. That's what they're comparing it to.
Yeah,
okay.
Minus and both services are $1 less if you pay for the year.
Ooh, $1 less
in one shot, but
so yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. Google Voice is free, but you have to sign your life away to Google.
Isn't Google Voice going away? Or something's happening to Google Voice.
Eventually, it will. I'm sure. Like everything else Google owns.
This was legacy voice is already phased out apparently. So I don't know. Whatever. Google's doing something with their stuff again.
Open source self-hosted mail cow also can relay from your servers. Yeah, certainly. If you can host your own mail, this isn't a problem for you because you can make as many burner email addresses as you want.
Yeah.
They're all at the same domain, unless you have several domains. You could have a separate domain just for spammers if you want. But yeah.
But it takes time and whatnot to do that. So. Okay.
All right.
One last
article
related to the first article. Sort of.
DJI drone. This is from Cyber News. DJI drone tracking data exposed in U.S. Okay.
Yeah. So
you added this one during the break, so I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I haven't dug deeply into it either, but I thought it was interesting because of the first article. So DJI makes you register your drone, and then it basically stores the tracking data,
as we mentioned earlier,
where your drone has been and everything. So since their security is absolutely perfect and unbreakable, somebody apparently broke in.
No, that's only Oracle claims that.
No, I'm sorry, nobody broke in. They opened it up themselves and forgot. So it says over 80,000.
That's not better. That's not better.
Over 80,000 drone IDs were exposed in a data leak after a database containing information from dozens of airspace monitoring devices manufactured by the Chinese-owned DJI was left accessible to the public.
Damn, we left the vault unlocked again, guys. All the money's gone. Says the bank security worker.
Yep. So, oops.
Sorry. All your data's gone, or not gone. All your data is exposed. God.
Yeah, so this is some sort of, let's see, FAA introduced remote ID. Okay, so they're talking about, so I guess the FAA has introduced the remote ID thing because everybody has a drone and we need to track where they are because otherwise, I don't know. I don't know why they don't do this to cars, but whatever. So DJI apparently has been doing this since 2017 with something called an aeroscope device. So it provides an in-flight drone identification system, and then it's been tracking that data and surveilling it. And they, I guess, lost that data. What's interesting is DJI drones are being used quite heavily in the Ukrainian war.
Oh, they're DJI? Okay.
Yeah, so they're using Russia and the Ukraine are using DJI drones. Some of the videos are fascinating where they're using the drones to attack each other. Some of them are pretty kind of well, you don't want to, if you got a weak stomach, you don't want to watch them because they're using drones to drop grenades as well. So
yeah, I bet that wouldn't be a good thing to watch.
They're being used in war now. And quite effectively, apparently.
Well, I mean, like drones, the word drone has been used in warfare for a long time, but they weren't the drones we're used to today. They were like
They
remote
weren't
piloted
quadcopters, They were,
aircraft.
they were
Yeah.
aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're using quadcopters now. DJI quadcopters, like the drone of choice to use in the war. I saw a video the other day, which I thought was really interesting, which was they were testing out a new device they got, which was this thing looked like a rocket launcher, like the weirdest, crazy rocket launcher thing in the world. And what it was is it's like a super high power antenna that you basically point in the general direction of a drone and fire it, and the idea is that it burns out the receivers in the
cool.
drone. So the drone either like falls out of the sky or returns home or gently drifts to the ground, like depending on what the drone is programmed to do.
Yeah.
So that you can shoot a drone out of the sky. It was kind of a neat system. It's stupidly large and looks like completely unwieldy, but
I remember back when drones first got popular, right? There were a lot of people making like net systems that they could shoot a net so they would entangle the propellers and make them fall out of the sky, because it was a privacy thing, right? Like, oh, a drone's flying over my house, I'm going to shoot it out of the sky because I'm an asshole. I'm sorry, because I'm concerned about my privacy. This is like that to a new level. And there were the other people that were shooting them with shotguns, because that's not unsafe.
Better shoot them with a shotgun than a rifle.
Oh, absolutely. I meant a net isn't going to hurt somebody if you miss. Hell, a shotgun will hurt someone even if you do hit it, because there's going to be pellets that it still escape. Yeah. Or at least they'll come raining on someone's house. Anyway, crazy world we live in.
Oh, hey, the database was in AWS.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so, gee, I wonder where they were storing that. So, yeah, so apparently it was like...
Was it another case of we left our bucket open to the public?
54 gig strong data set. It doesn't say. But generally S3 is where that stuff, because S3 is super easy to leave open to the public.
Yeah.
If this was like, Redshift or RDS or something, like, then that's really stupid. Like, why would you ever open that to the public?
That was quite the screw up. Yeah.
Yep. So, and that's it, folks. That's all the news.
That's all the news.
We've run out of news.
That's all the news. All right. So, since we've run out of news, it's time to close up the show. I have to get back to my notes thing so I can close up the show. Although you think I'd have this memorized by now. All right, folks. So, it's been a fun night. Thank you for joining me tonight, Jason. Uncle Marc couldn't make it because he's in like Disney or something. Although on Discord, he just popped up as playing Elden Ring, so I'm sure he's in the hotel playing Elden Ring on his Steam Deck. God, if I did that, my wife would kick me in the shins and then kick me out of the hotel. Anyway,
hey, if you're looking for a Steam Deck, their sort of purchase and shipping is apparently just zipping right now.
Oh, so, they're actually buyable now. Yes, I've heard about that.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know. Maybe I'll get
my play date. My play date is supposed to come sometime now. I'm in the shipping zone now for that, but nothing yet.
I don't know what product you're referring to.
That's the Game Boy looking thing with the crank.
Crank? So you can crank it instead of charging it? Is that it? So you get a workout to play your video games?
No. The crank is actually a part of the controller. Play.date if you want to take a look.
All right, I'll have to look it up. All right, so anyway, folks, thanks for watching live. If you've watched this whole freaking shebang live, if you do want to watch us live, you should check us out on YouTube and Twitch. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast. If you want to join our Discord community, there is a link for it in the show notes, or just go to ironsysadmin.com. There's a link for it there. You can chat with us and partake in various communities around things like Home Assistant, because we have a lot of folks that like to do home automation. So there's fun stuff there. So I have to hit the button, right?
Discord!
As I said, Discord. Or are you saying you don't use Discord? SAP kernel, SAP kernel. You may not. I tried to do a Matrix community, but nobody bought into it, so we ended up on Discord. So I'm sorry about that. Actually,
Matrix is free. You don't have to buy it.
You can join through Matrix if you do not want to use Discord. I have a bridge set up. So yes, if you don't like Discord, join us through Matrix. You can find the Iron Sysadmin. We have a, what's the word I'm looking for now? The thing where you can group channels together. That community. Is it a community? I forget anymore. They changed the name of it a while back. I forget what it's called now. Anyway, we're on Matrix. So look it up. I can probably put a link for it somewhere here. In the meantime, yeah, I was closing the show up. Matrix. You can find us on Matrix. I will find a link to the Matrix community and throw it in the show notes if you're curious about joining through Matrix. I would love it if more people used Matrix because I like Matrix better as a platform. You guys made me do Discord. Anyway, I'm on a soapbox again. So where was I? Right, social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Iron Sysadmin. And I think that's everything I had to say for tonight. I can actually finally go eat the food that I ordered before the show that showed up too late. I'm looking forward to that. Any final words there, Jason, before you're ushered off to whatever you have to do on a Thursday night?
Now I'm thinking about Chinese food again. You suck.
Sorry, I haven't eaten yet. All I had was these 2 beers. Does it show? They really aren't that bad. They're like 5%. I can totally take 2 5% beers.
You know, if it was a proper stout, you wouldn't have to go eat because you would have already eaten.
You're right. You're right. It's okay. It's almost stout season.
It's always stout season.
It is always stout season. And on that, folks, we will see you next time, 2 weeks from now, or whatever the hell the date is. 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month. So, yeah, I think our next one is like the 20-something. We'll see you then. Have a good one, folks.
27?
27? I'll go with it.
Yes.
27 sounds right. The 27th. We'll see you then. All right, folks. Have a good one. Good night.
Night all.